This episode was a special one for me. I was joined again by Amro Imam, my very first guest on Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways, exactly 1 year after we recorded the first episode of the show. We talked about what's changed in quantum over the past 12 months, why Amro stepped away from pure research to complete an MBA at NYU Abu Dhabi, and how that shift has reshaped the way he thinks about scaling deep tech. He also shared what he's building now with CAM, a new initiative focused on growing the quantum ecosystem across the Arab world through research, collaboration, education, translation, and hackathons. It turned into a wide-ranging conversation about startups, investors, talent pipelines, and what meaningful progress in quantum actually looks like when you've moved beyond headlines and hardware roadmaps. Quantum technology is moving fast, but building real impact takes more than breakthroughs. It takes the right people, the right strategy, and the right ecosystem. Welcome to Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways. I'm Amir Rasool. Each episode I speak with founders, researchers, and operators, shaping how quantum is built, commercialized, and scaled in the real world. And if you're building teams in quantum, QAI Talent tackles this exact challenge. And welcome back, Amro Imam.
Thank you very much, Amir, for having me. It's nice to be back.
Fantastic. Amro, you were my first guest on the podcast. I suppose, how does it feel to be back 1 year later?
Listen, it also is kind of astounding that it's only been a year. I feel like there's so much that has happened over the past 365 days. There's a lot to speak about, and hopefully we'll get to some parts of it in today's episode.
Sick. I suppose when you think back to that first episode, what's quite general really at this stage, but what's the biggest change you've seen in the quantum space since then?
I think this has taken place before the start of the year, but I think it's more intensified over the past year. Two things in particular. I think we've seen a redirection of companies towards more niche applications rather than just being generalists. I think some of the examples that we've seen of companies that try to be agnostic when it comes to hardware, for example, Zapata Computing that ended up liquidating in 2024. I think that was a lesson learned for the quantum ecosystem to try and focus a bit more on niche applications and to look at successes such as D-Wave, for instance, that are targeting optimization problems in specific for specific applications. While, of course, you have the large incumbents like IBM, Google, and Microsoft still yearning to achieve that universal quantum computing machine. And I think another thing is that there's definitely more integration with AI, or companies at least are trying to do that because the hype is undeniable. And where there is hype, there is funding. I think given that both of these are deep tech applications, I think some quantum computing companies and startups are trying to perhaps slap on the name of AI and have it involved in their operations one way, shape, or form to have a more attractive offering to.
Yeah, because that seems to be where the money is right now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of the investors that are actually looking at the pure AI plays, a lot of them do not comprehend like the full extent of the technology. And so I think there's an opportunity there for the people that want to attract these investors to slap on quantum as well with it so that, if you know that the investor is not going to do the due diligence in terms of the technical part, they're definitely going to do it from the financial perspective. But if the technical part is still up in the air and everyone collectively agrees that it's up in the air, then you're not going to face a lot of questioning when it comes to the infancy of the technology that you're investing in, especially if there's a lot of hype.
Fantastic. Well, we'll cover this a little bit more, I suppose, when we talk about the ecosystem and the Middle East. But on a personal level, what's changed most for you over the past year?
I think I've become less of a scientist. So over the past year, I pursued an MBA at Stern at NYU Abu Dhabi with specializations in finance and management. And it was a very intentional decision because even though I do appreciate the scientific mode of thinking, I think in today's ecosystem, it could be a bit parochial where you're a bit too focused on the science and you're a bit too focused on the academic side of things rather than the potential usability of it, the scalability or the business side of things. And that's something that unfortunately throughout my education, I missed out on. And even though you don't really need an MBA to be able to achieve that sort of acumen, working with a startup, which I did, was very helpful towards that end. But I'm the type of person that loves formal education, especially when it comes from an institution that knows what they're doing. And so I decided to complement my scientific experience, my startup experience in tech world with some more business acumen in a way that's accelerated because everything is happening so quickly at an alarmingly accelerated rate. And to me, that almost felt like an acquisition of some sorts, for lack of a better word, of knowledge in a way that's sped up rather than having to learn it on the job. Just because an MBA gives you exposure to multiple sides of business, be it from a strategy perspective, a finance perspective, and so on.
So where are you doing your MBA?
So my MBA is actually over. It was a 1 year long MBA that started in January of 2025 and ended in December of 2025. It was at NYU Abu Dhabi Stern School of Business.
Fantastic. So you kind of alluded to this. So the gap you're trying to fill was to try and give yourself more of a business perspective rather than just science.
Precisely. Very often in conversations that we used to have when I was working with Sandbox AQ before the MBA, we were talking about the talent gap when it comes to research and science, which is definitely a problem and exists. But I think there's an even bigger problem, even though there's perhaps not as obvious there's not an obvious demand for it now. But I think many of the very successful quantum computing companies now that are on the right trajectory are recruiting these bilingual individuals, be it at the C-suite or the actual business development side. Someone that is both fluent in the technical aspect of things, someone that can speak physics to the engineers, but someone that can also speak business to the investors. And for me, I love scale. And I think to be able to achieve a type of impactful scale, you need to be that type of individual. And I think it's an interesting niche to have. It's an interesting perspective. Most of the advice that's given to me is generally to focus and specialize on one niche, which could be very useful for many people. I prefer to be someone that has a little bit of everything, but in the same way to dabble in each of those topics in a way that's meaningful, not just by reading an article or two. I'd like to have deep expertise in multiple specializations. And I think that overall provides an interesting perspective when it comes to tackling problems, especially in the deep tech.
Yeah. So from what you've seen, where do most quantum startups sort of struggle on the business side then?
I think it's the value proposition that's given to investors. So if you're a startup that's working on building the next big quantum processor, you have to be extremely honest with your investors that this technology is about 10 years away. And investors generally suffer from this bias, perhaps, that's called short-termism, which in reality highlights the disparity between what a scientist or a researcher or an engineer looks at when developing the technology, and they have the risk tolerance to wait for 5 or 10 years to be able to reach that technology that they're working with. In the same way that whenever we're talking about the nuclear industry, for instance, we're always saying that it's always 30 years away. In quantum, there's a long timeline, and investors generally expect a shorter timeline for their returns. So if you're not being clear with your investors, they could fall out of love very easily for the type of progress that you are performing. If they're not aware that this is a long-term play, then when they don't see the results that they're expecting because of a lack of miscommunication that comes at the beginning of your partnership or the beginning of the pitch that you're offering to your investors, there will be a large misalignment. So that's one problem that I see. And I think another problem is with companies that are also trying to be generalists over specialized for niche applications. And the issue with that is to be able to create a quantum processor that's viable, that's fault tolerant, you need a lot of capital expenditure. And if you're a startup that's depending on investor money, that could be a very difficult equation to balance. And so I would say it's probably better off if you don't have the capital to expend for years or even a decade and trying to create a quantum processor. You're better off targeting a niche application for that's a pain point for a certain company in your ecosystem.
And do you think companies, it's something I've kind of read previously, that companies are now starting to pivot towards applications in the last year?
I think it's definitely at least marketed so. Whether that is actually happening or not is not clear. But the big incumbent players that, like I said, Microsoft, the Google, the IBMs, They're still trying to work, of course, to achieve universal quantum computing, but there's definitely a movement to target more niche applications, be it in the finance industry for portfolio optimization or the pharmaceutical industry for molecular simulation. We're
Mhm.
definitely seeing more players that are targeting these niche applications compared to before.
Funnily enough, I'm doing a workforce upskilling piece for an insurance company and looking at how the different roles in insurance, it's quite a heavy piece, could and will be affected by quantum, which has given me a lot of opportunity to do some research, which I find quite fascinating. How can people in quantum do a better job about explaining their value beyond the physics?
I think you have to focus on IP. This is the question from the perspective of an investor. Are you trying to highlight the value to an investor?
Yeah, I suppose so. And also from your experience, obviously having done the MBA, and I suppose trying to see how that's changed how you look at scaling, adoption, and
Yeah.
so on.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because the value proposition differs vastly depending on who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a sovereign entity, for example, highlighting the fact that if you become an early investor, an early adopter of quantum security applications, or transitioning your databases into something that's PQ, the play here is to ensure that you're addressing the pain point for that sovereign entity, which would more likely than not be national security. If you're speaking to an investor, I think highlighting perhaps this crossing the chasm, this is one of the interesting things that we've learned in the MBA, where you have this gap between early adopters and an early majority when it comes to technology adoption. And so at first, if you're one of the very few players in the early adopter stage, you would be able to acquire IP, giving you competitive advantage over competitors that might be in the same space. But you're going to have to suffer for a longer amount of time until the technology catches up to the investments that you're pouring in. Because at any point in time, I mean, everyone gives estimates, but general estimate is that any sort of viable quantum computing is about 10 years away. And, anyone could
Mhm.
say lower, anyone could say a larger number than that. It's really unclear. And then you have the early majority where perhaps it's a bit too late for you to try and acquire the IP, or that it becomes too large of a ticket price for you to be able to get in on this cake. And so I think a value proposition for investors would be that focus on IP, that even though this technology is not something that exists now in a viable, pragmatic fashion that could be used for commercial applications, especially if you're talking about universal quantum computing. If we're talking about annealing, that's a different story. I think D-Wave has done a fantastic job at highlighting how a quantum computing company could be profitable or could create revenue by being very focused and very niche. I think one of the interesting things that they worked with Volkswagen on was traffic route optimization. And I think there was another company that they worked with for logistics as well. But for universal quantum computing, I think the focus for investors should be the acquisition of IP. And then there could also be, a play where a company comes in, looks at a particular pain point for a company, let's say in the oil and gas industry. There are a lot of byproducts that come out of the refining process. And these companies want to find the most efficient way of recreating or playing around with these compounds to be able to create
Mhm.
something that is useful. So maybe you come in as offering your research team to look at the current raw materials or the inputs that these oil and gas companies possess and tell them that we'll enter a research partnership where over the next X amount of years, we'll be working with your team internally to find out how we could better utilize these raw materials. Or you could also highlight the fact that you could potentially use quantum inspired techniques, which I think are gaining more popularity. I think one of the very interesting things that have come with the rise of quantum algorithms is the fact that many of the already existing classical systems could actually reap a lot of benefits from things that are quantum inspired that do not necessarily use a quantum processor, but the way that the algorithm functions could also be applied to a certain degree to a classical algorithm using high performance compute.
Interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, to be honest. But yeah, fascinating. It kind of takes me on to what you're doing at the moment, because you're now in the Middle East and you've set up CAM. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. So for people who are hearing about it for the first time, what does CAM mean? Why do you choose that name, and what is it you're looking to do?
Yeah. So CAM, QAM, infamously seems like an abbreviation, but it's not yet an abbreviation. We'll get to that sometime soon into the future. What it essentially is a quantum ecosystem accelerator for the Arrow Bullets. Given the fact that quantum computing and quantum technologies in general are very nascent, the best bets that this region has in terms of providing some degree of value is resource and knowledge sharing. There is no systematic way to achieve that in the Arab world, in the Middle East, North Africa. So what we created was this virtual community, this virtual ecosystem where we have ambassadors in every single country or every single state in the Arab world that could focus on spreading out the word that there is this community where you can communicate with someone in Saudi Arabia if you're in Morocco and you want to work on a particular uh, area of research, or there's a particular investor that's looking to sponsor and fund a project that's happening in the UAE or Egypt. Opportunities for students, such as internships, or even translated works of the most seminal works that are related to quantum computing and quantum mechanics in general, translated to Arabic. One of the things that I think when we're constantly having this conversation about talent, it's one thing to be able to develop the right curricula to focus on the right topics. But for non English speakers, non English learners in specific, there's an added burden of linguistic linguistic difficulty if English is not your first language. I mean, people already think that quantum mechanics and quantum computing is difficult as it is, but imagine doing that in a second language that's not yours. And so, what we're doing at Chem is also accelerating the rate at which translated documents are moving from English to Arabic, so that instead of having to deal with the burden, the linguistic burden, they have to only exclusively deal with the scientific burden. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of attention that's paid at the public sector level to this problem. So we decided to take it into our own vision in a way of sorts. And one of the things that we're going to be doing sometime very soon, over the next couple of months after the release of this episode, we're going to be creating the first ever virtual quantum hackathon that spans across the Arab world. We have an amazing example to look at, which is the NYU Abu Dhabi hackathon that's now going on to its 14th iteration in 2026.
So, Amro, I know you're also doing quite a bit with regards to ecosystem building. And for people who are hearing about it for the first time, you've got CAM. So, what does CAM mean? Why do you choose that name? And I suppose, what are you looking to address?
Yeah. So CHEM is the quantum ecosystem accelerator in the Arab world. The word itself is infamously not an abbreviation, even though there's an ample opportunity for it to be. So we'll work on that. But the word chem itself is Arabic for quantum. Short and sweet, one syllable. So we went with that. And what we're trying to achieve with chem is to achieve a level of resource and knowledge sharing across the entire Arab world. Given that quantum, be it quantum tech or quantum computing, is still a very nascent technology, the best bet for this region is to make sure that they cooperate in a way that's efficient and effective. And even though there isn't a lot of attention that's being paid by the public sector across, or even the private sector actually, across the Arab states, we decided to take matters into our own hand and focus on that effort. And what that means on the ground is a combination of things. One, we are trying to connect researchers across different countries. So if there's a researcher in Morocco that wants to work on a particular algorithm and they know of someone in Saudi Arabia, we want Chem to be the virtual space where they can speak to one another and collaborate publicly so that they could also inspire others to work on particular areas within quantum or to even find one another. That's also, it's like a marketplace for scientists, researchers, and students, but also more practically, investors. And again, this is very early stage, but we're trying to build it in a way that it's not just a group of interested enthusiasts that are coming to speak about quantum in a way that's hand wavy. We're trying to provide real utility to everyone that is in this community. So if you're looking for funding for a particular project and you're a PI, or if you want an internship in a certain segment of quantum, this would be the place for you to join, to be able to be on top of things, to be the first person to hear about news within the Arab world before they make it to the public sphere as well. Another thing that we're trying to tackle with Chem is the linguistic burden that Arabic speakers have to face. And it's not just Arabic speakers, it's people that are non-English speaking. Most of the content that's available online for people to learn quantum computing and quantum mechanics is in English. And the science is already very difficult. Imagine what it would be like to learn it in a second language. So we're trying to
100%.
also accelerate by supporting efforts and also doing things internally where we're translating these seminal works and textbooks on quantum computing and quantum tech into Arabic so that the learner could only focus on the scientific difficulty rather than having to also be burdened with the linguistic one. And we'll be creating very soon, the first quantum computing hackathon, the first virtual quantum computing hackathon in the Arab world. And there will no longer be an issue that has to do with your visa of not being able to get a green light from a certain country to be able to participate in a hackathon, or where we're going to have to be limited by the amount of participants because of facility restrictions. And so we want as much collaboration as possible to erupt out of this community. And we're trying to be extremely mindful so that we're not reinventing the wheel. And so we're going to be hopefully very closely in collaboration with the NYU Abu Dhabi Quantum Hackathon, which are on their 14th iteration now in 2026. We learned so much from that model. Many individuals from our community, many of our ambassadors. So Chem has an ambassador for every single country in the Arab world, or we're expanding towards that. And many of them have somehow benefited from the NYU Abu Dhabi Quantum Hackathon. And so it's not in any way a replacement, but rather a complement. And I'm meeting with actually Professor Sanao, the director of the program, right after this recording. So hopefully we'll have an interesting partnership to be able to truly amplify the efforts to build this quantum ecosystem across the Arab world.
Okay, a couple of things. So it's fantastic, and I think it's a really, really, really good initiative. I mean, where do you start with translating the quantum information textbooks to that? And how many people have you got doing it? It's crazy.
Yeah. So I think it generally starts off with the books that are most useful to the students when it comes to learning quantum mechanics at first. And you'll find a lot of debates, but it's generally the stuff that's foundational and the stuff that is most used, so that even the translated stuff could also be something for these new learners to have in common with the more advanced learner. So we're not just looking at what makes most sense, what is easiest, but also what is most pervasive and what is most used. And so there's this very interesting effort, an independent effort actually, but we're closely collaborating with them, and some of their members are part of our community. One of them is actually our ambassador to Saudi Arabia, and they're translating one of the most seminal books on quantum computing, Intro to Quantum Information Sciences, Mike and Ike, more infamously known. And they have this YouTube channel where they dissect every single chapter in detail in Arabic with worked examples so that the learner could have some degree of engagement with the material rather than being someone that's just reading the textbook on its own. So that's an amazing effort that we're trying to support. Over the future as well, we'll be trying to leverage the power of LLMs to be able to create an agent focused on Arabic content for quantum, be it for quantum circuit design for hackathons or quantum foundations. But to be able to get to that, you need high quality inputs. And that high quality input in Arabic still does not exist. Fortunately, we have many Arabic LLMs, many of them in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. I think Jace is one of the very interesting ones in the UAE, and the Falcon models that were created by TII, I think, are great efforts, but we still need to work on the inputs. And that's a step that we're trying to accelerate.
I can't even fathom how labor intensive that's going to be and how labor intensive it is. But fantastic, once again, initiative to do. I'll have to, well, where can people find that YouTube channel? What's it called? So talking about hackathons, obviously you had the NYU Abu Dhabi hackathon. I know you've got one happening in Egypt coming soon. First, you can tell me about that, but also why are hackathons such an effective way to bring new people into quantum?
It's pace. I think by default, humans are drawn to competition. And when it's done at such an accelerated rate where you're doing it for 2 to 3 days, the actual hackathon period, or perhaps for the NYU Abu Dhabi hackathon in specific, you get to learn for a couple of weeks beforehand with online courses and classes, which is very nice. But I think the intriguing thing about hackathons is that, especially if marketed for first time learners, is that you're attracting people that perhaps have never heard of this tech, and you're telling them that we're going to be putting you in teams with people that are perhaps more experienced, some with similar experience to yours. So it enables that psychological safety for the learner to be part of that experience, where they know that they're not going to be penalized if they do something that's completely off what the standard is, because one, it's a team effort, two, it's an opportunity to learn, and three, there's no grade that comes out of it. And I believe that every hackathon participant truly is a winner. And I'm not just trying to say that out of motivation, but you will always learn something in a hackathon, always, be it from your teammates or from the problem that you were tasked with tackling during the hackathon. So hand in hand with the fact that it's fast paced and you don't need to stop your academic program that you're participating in, or even if you're working with a certain company, you could all just take a couple of days off or take a couple of hours in a single day to be able to participate in a hackathon. It's a
Mhm.
wonderful opportunity to stay up to date with what's new, with what's happening, and to also get an idea of where the talent is. I mean, the NYU Abu Dhabi hackathon truly attracts some of the most remarkable talent across the globe, not just the UAE, not just Middle East. And
Mhm.
we've seen similar things in the first national scale quantum hackathon that happened in Egypt in 2025. Happy to speak about that as well.
Yeah, please tell me about that.
Yeah, so this was the first effort to bring multiple institutions together to create something that is purely quantum computing focused. And it happened in Alexandria in a very poetic manner at the Alexandria Library, which is absolutely gorgeous. If you've never been, you must go. They have some very interesting HPC facilities as well. But the amount of talent that I came across in that Alexandria quantum computing hackathon in specific was truly impressive. I'm never accustomed to the amount of talent that I see whenever I go back to Egypt. But for this
Yeah.
quantum computing hackathon, just casually, you'd find a couple of undergraduate students, not even seniors, perhaps maybe like sophomores, that would be talking to me about how they built this AI products, and they're in conversations with company X and Y to commercialize. I was like, is this like part of a course? Is this part of a club? And they're like, no, we're just doing this on the side. I was like, okay. The same thing with the type of presentations that we saw. So I was there. My capacity there was as a judge and a speaker. And so I got to see all of the projects. Most of these students that were participating have never done anything in quantum before. It attracted many computer science students, many physics students, engineering as well. But the overwhelming majority had no experience in quantum computing. The amount of learning that happened because of that hackathon, not just because of the preparation that went in beforehand, but also the fact that you gave someone the opportunity to work in a team on tackling a problem and then pitch it in front of established players in the industry. We had amazing professors from the Egyptian ecosystem. We had representatives from IBM, even from OQI, the Open Quantum Institute. That just gives so much confidence and so much motivation to the student that, hey, maybe I can do more of this, not just at a competition level, but maybe I can actually take this seriously because you've exposed them to it. And so this is one of the other things that I really love about hackathons, is that it gives a feeling of autonomy or a feeling of capability to the students that participate in it, even though they've never been exposed to this tech before.
And obviously, yeah, I mean, I know you've done some in the US as well. What's it like being on the judging side?
Yeah, this is new actually. So I was a judge twice this year. I found myself. I mean, I delegated, of course, the more technical, deep tech questions to my colleagues who are actively doing research. I've been away from research for a while now. I realized that I'm gravitating more towards scalability and the business side of things, which I think is an element that isn't always emphasized in hackathons. And I think it would be a great learning opportunity to change around the rubric so that that's also actually taken seriously. But it was an honor, honestly, to be able to sit on a panel where I'm judging students that I shared a stage with just 2 years before, where I was pitching myself with my team. So to be on
Yeah.
that opposite end, after having that experience and also after gaining a certain degree of business acumen through the MBA and the tech startup experience, I think is a very interesting lens. And the fact that there's generally always a good practice that hackathons, all the hackathons I've been part of generally do this. There's panel discussion that happens discreetly with the judges to give feedback about what was good, what could be better, but also to discuss the winners of the hackathon, which I think is interesting. But it's definitely a unique perspective. And the more that the hackathon organizers listen to the judges' feedback, I think the more improvement they can achieve for the next iteration. And that's what we're trying to do with this quantum computing hackathon through Chem. Not only are
Mhm.
we taking the experts' advice into consideration in creating this hackathon, we're also very much listening to the participants, especially the veterans, the ones that have 2, 3, 4, 5 hackathons in their portfolio, to be able to understand what worked, what could be improved. We don't want to be repeating what has happened before just because that's the standard. We want to create something that truly provides the ultimate amount of efficiency for the learner as much as possible.
What a journey you've had in the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I'm glad that we're celebrating the anniversary of the first episode here with you, Amir. It's always a pleasure.
Exactly, exactly. So, a quick fire. I know you're pushed for time. You tell me you've got calls afterwards. What are you most excited about going into 2026?
I think on a personal level, I'm very excited to bring the expertise that I had in New York and also in this accelerated year of learning in the MBA to
Yeah.
actual utility in the Middle East. Just because there is so much growth that's happening across, be it in Egypt, be it in the UAE or Saudi Arabia or Qatar, even. I think there's so much to do. And the good thing is that most of the public sector actually wants to fund and support initiatives that help, in the tech ecosystem, be it for commercialization purposes or for education, learning, and development. And so I'm very excited to give a bit of what I've learned, at least, towards that effort. And I'm also excited for a couple of things. I mean, I talked to you about Chem. We're really going to be scaling our efforts
Mhm.
very quickly in the next couple of months. Another thing that I'm excited about, which completely has nothing to do with quantum, is Qudwa, actually. This is a business that I also started before completing my MBA, and it's focused on highlighting remarkable role models from the Middle East and North Africa that have contributed immensely to the sciences, to philosophy, to medicine, but often get overlooked in the conversation. The t-shirt I'm wearing now highlights Ibn al-Haytham, who is the father of modern optics and arguably the scientific method. We're celebrating Al-Khwarizmi, we're celebrating Fatima Al-Fihriya, that created the first and the oldest university in the world, which is in Morocco, Fez. So that's another thing that I would say I'm super excited about.
So this is a tough one, but what does success in the region look like in 5 years?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple of perspectives. The one that I'm most interested in for this region in particular is genuine talent development. I think it's great to have the Microsofts and the IBMs establishing headquarters in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. But I think there is still much more to be done to truly developing the local talents across our region. And there needs to be some very, very specific and very intentful monitoring of the type of efforts that these companies generally bring in. Because things could look amazing on paper, but if a company
Yeah.
comes in, establishes headquarters, stays for 5 years or 10 years in your locality, but then you don't have a degree of knowledge transfer or local talent development, then I think for the sake of sustainability, that's a failure. That's a huge failure. It's great for the press. It's great for building rapport, perhaps, with global communities that, you're serious about building this tech, you're serious about being a tech ecosystem, but you cannot be serious about being a sustainable tech ecosystem if you don't have the pipeline to develop local talent. So that's one of the things that I would like to focus on to be the most important metric when it comes to success in 2026.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I think grassroots initiatives compared to corporate and even top-down government is critical in developing that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that comes with easing up regulations for the learners or the people that are trying to create initiatives to help the learner. Comes with subsidies. It comes with sponsorship opportunities. It comes for a genuine monitoring of the companies that are coming in to deploy your own capital to be able to actually say, yes, we have trained 15 engineers, we've trained 12 scientists over the past 4 years of our presence here in the region. And then to have a genuine test for whether that has actually happened.
Fantastic. Amro, this is a full circle moment in a way. You were my first guest on this show when I was kind of opening up myself to quantum and quantum pathways. A year later, we're talking about ecosystems, business, government in the Middle East, and the next phase of quantum globally. And I'm so happy that you joined me again, and just to see what you've achieved in such a short period of time. People doing an MBA on its own is tough. To do that in the Middle East, as well as all of these other initiatives, hats off and credit to you. Thank you for coming back and sharing your journey so openly. I'm really excited to see where Cam goes next. Yeah. And thank you once again, Amro.
Thank you very much, Amir. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on this podcast. And congratulations to you for creating such a successful series. I've been keeping up with everything you're doing. It's truly, truly magnificent. And I can't wait for the next catch up, maybe in 2027.
Well, you know what? I think we've set a precedent here now. I think you're going to be my first guest per season, each year going forward. But once again, Amro, thanks again. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best. Obviously, we'll keep in touch and I'll be, and who knows? I mean, if there's things to report, let's get out there and report them and we can catch up in a few months' time. But yeah, I think CAM is such a great initiative and I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you very much, Amir. I appreciate you.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways. If you found it useful, follow and subscribe wherever you listen and share it with someone working in quantum or emerging tech. And if your organisation is hiring in quantum, you can find us at QAI Talent. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.